for an interview for Black History Month. Rosemary is an author and historian. She's the president of the Black History Society of Canada. You are one of the people, you are the person who spearheaded the fight to have Black History Month recognized first by the City of Toronto, then the province of Ontario, and then the government of Canada. So, Mary, wonderful to have you here. Thank you for taking the time to do this interview. Tell us what prompted you to fight to have Black History Month recognized in Canada?
It needed to happen.
Uh-huh.
But thank you so much, Chris, for having me as part of this so that I can explain it a little bit more. I headed the Ontario Black History Society, which had already been in existence before I got there, and I amplified the mission and mandate of that organization. And unfortunately, or fortunately, when I first became president, it was absolutely by surprise. I had not been informed that I had to formally petition the City of Toronto for what already existed as Black History Month with the City of Toronto. We had to ask for it every year, and I didn't know
Uh-huh.
anything about that. So we almost lost it. I
Right.
almost lost it too, actually. It's like, how could this happen?
Hmm.
So pulled in a lot of favors, got the city to declare it, even though we were seeking it late. So that happened. And then I
What
realized
year was that you got the City of Toronto to recognize it? Or about,
um, I got the city of Toronto to recognize it in, I guess it would have been effective 1994 because
okay,
I became president of the Ontario Black History Society in 1992, 1990, 1993. Yeah. Um,
okay.
my son
Yeah.
was just
So you
very.
became president in 1993, and you got the City of Toronto to recognize Black History Month on an ongoing basis in 1994.
That's correct.
Okay.
And realizing that this was so precarious, like if I'm finding myself as president of this only provincial heritage organization in the country with a focus on Black history, a position which I ended up holding for over 22 years, if I could almost help to bring it down, so to speak, I thought this cannot happen again. So, with a contact from the province, who worked with whatever the Ministry of Citizenship and Culture might have been called then,
Yeah.
Daniel Bryan, he was able to get it done for us with the province. And then I realized this is really not just our issue, it's a national issue. And I began advocating for a national recognition with a number of different members of parliament. My local member of parliament, I lived in Parkdale High Park at that time, but all members of parliament that I thought might have an interest or a willingness, and no one was biting.
Okay.
Um, so I happened to be at a fundraiser for at Denham Jolly's house, and Jean Augustine was there,
Hmm.
and I
And Jean
approached.
Augustine, just so for people to know, she's the first Black woman who was elected to the Parliament in Canada.
So I approached her, and I said, this is before social media, right? So you
Yeah.
have to actually mail things to people or phone them or
The good
fax.
old days.
Yeah. So I asked, I'd sent her and others this request to consider Black History Month. Had she received it? And she had. Would she consider being the person to take it to the House? And she hesitated. There was a lawyer in attendance, Lloyd Perry, the same lawyer who worked on the patty war issue that we had in terms of Jamaican patties. Anyway, they went into another part of Denham's house, talked about it for a bit, and when she came out, she then told me she would support it, which
Nice.
I very appreciative of. So this is now by December of 1995, it was passed. The office was informed that it was going to be on CPAC and we could watch it. It
Uh-huh.
happened, and the first national celebration was in February 1996. Now, in the meantime, I'd been flooding her office at her request with Black history information so that she could have something, an arsenal of material to use as she went to get support for this. It went through. I was invited to bring people to Ottawa. I brought a busload, and I was the only person who was on stage with the Black elected members of Canada, national members, and the Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, and I was invited to address the nation. So it was very exciting, and it was a packed room. I mean, there
Yeah.
were
What
easily
was your message in that speech that you gave at the federal government when they were declaring February Black History Month in Canada? What was just, the gist of your speech? What was the main message you wanted to get across?
well, I didn't have like 20 minutes,
Yeah.
but in my brief message, I basically in my brief bilingual message, I basically said how proud I was that this had happened, how much I hoped that we would all then learn more about Black history, not just in February, but all through the year. And, that's kind of all the time I really had. I also presented the Prime Minister with an art print by artist David Kubuka, which also then formed our Black History Month poster for that year. But it was just that sense of, potency that this something wonderful was finally going to happen
Yeah.
because Black History Month meant that the country was acknowledging that were people in that were here for a long time, that they had contributed, and that they intended to continue to be here.
There's one article I read that, it said that one of the things that prompted you to do this is somebody asked you where your father came from.
Well,
Eh,
that's obviously part of it.
Yeah,
And I'm a generational Black Canadian. I don't know if I coined that term or not, but it's the idea that I don't have another place that I'm connected to.
right.
My family has been in this country since, well, I didn't know this, as a little kid. These aren't important issues. But when you are asked a question, like, where's your father from? Where's your mother from? It's like you realize you don't know. They're from here, right?
Yeah.
But I learned more about that. My mother's family has been in this country since about 1830. The survivors of people who came into Canada on the Underground Railroad. And my father's family, I was surprised to learn, have actually been in Canada since 1783, invited here by the British government to be free. So they were the Black Loyalists, they were also the late Loyalists, and they were also the refugees of the War of 1812. And they were not from Nova Scotia, they were from New Brunswick.
Okay. You know what? It's so this is part of it. Somebody asks you where your father's from, and your father, grandfather, great grandfather, going back generations to the early late 1700s, early 1800s, they're Canadian,
Yeah,
and so you're a multi-generational Canadian. And
yes,
so the part of what you did here in declaring Black History Month is you wanted everybody to have that education. So
exactly. And it was also, I'm going to just say it this way, frightening that it was my story and I didn't know. Because you cannot assume that just because you are from here that you know everything about your own story. There's other things that happen. People move from their communities of origin. Family materials disappear or are not shared, and all those things that just add to more mystery. So that was also rather infuriating.
yeah,
How could I not know that my
yeah,
own story began so much earlier? I had always known about my mother's story. I was in frequent contact with my cousins near Woodstock, Ontario. So I knew their story. We was very clear on that story. But when I realized that my family had actually been in this country even over 100 years earlier than that, it was pretty
yeah.
surprising.
So it seems like there's two goals here. One is to educate the broader community about Black history and the Black history in Canada. But the other goal is for Black Canadians to explore their own history and learn their own history. Is
Well,
that
and
yeah,
exactly, and not just Black Canadians, because by the time I was with president of the Ontario Black History Society, I had three children. I was an at-home mom because my son was still nursing. So, but my older children were, going to school. They had friends who similarly didn't know that they might be generationally Canadian, that the idea that somebody could be Black and not from some other place was shocking for people when it should have just been, well, yeah, of course. It wasn't.
One of the other initiatives that you led was the fight to have Emancipation Day recognized. Tell me
Yeah.
what prompted that?
I would love to say it was my own original idea. It wasn't. But actually, Black History Month wasn't my own idea either. I worked on amplifying what other people had already started and making it more secure. With Emancipation Day, my work with the OBHS, I was already doing something that's very trendy now. It wasn't at the time. I was, it was a volunteer position, number one. And I had three children at home. So I was working from home a lot. I got a call literally on a Saturday night from someone I did not know who'd been referred to me. And he was the president of the Caribbean Historical Society of Trinidad and Tobago. And he said, look, in so many words, we have this thing called Emancipation Day, and we think that you should do it too.
Uh,
We met. I agreed with him. I convinced my board this was a good idea. And so began the journey to have August 1st recognized. It happened quickly with the City of Toronto, with Metro Toronto, with the City of Ottawa, even the City of New York, but I didn't do that one. He did. And then the process of having it with Ontario and ultimately with the federal government. It went it was a unanimous um, motion, the first unanimous motion of the provincial parliament, with Ted Arnott, Maria Van Bommel, and Peter Cormos all supporting it. And then, that was 2008, but it had gone to the federal government, it had gone to the House about three times on a private member's bill by someone who's now deceased, an MP who's now deceased. It, I had a parliamentary petition. I mean, this is over years. I'm at that point no longer with the Ontario Black History Society and was continuing to have this secured. So ultimately, it was on a private motion by MP Majid Jahari that it did go through. And I'm very appreciative that, you know, private members' bills are kind of precious. And when people use them, you have to appreciate that. And I should also mention that I've approached this in a non-partisan way because there are times when um, people are acting on their own volition or they're acting on their interpretation that may or may not align with my own. But I think in terms of Emancipation Day, everyone can support the idea of freedom
right.
and the what that means for
Can you
everyone.
just, for people who aren't aware, what is Emancipation Day?
August 1st, 1834 is the date when the British Imperial Act went into effect in the British Empire. And Canada was part of the British Empire at that time. So what that did was it ended the enslavement of people of African origin in Canada and in other parts of the Caribbean. Now, in Canada, it went into effect August 1st, 1834, but in other places, it went into effect 4 years later. There was a gradual emancipation,
Right.
but that wasn't the case in Canada.
And when you recognize this Emancipation Day, it's just it's such an important historical milestone for people to know about. But one of the things that I think about too is that we still do not have freedom for everybody. It's an ongoing struggle. Can you talk a little bit about this ongoing struggle for freedom for everyone?
Yeah, how best to phrase that one? I think one of the things that I think kids struggle with is that they want to feel that you're free and it's done. And I think that what grown-ups appreciate is that freedom is never done. It isn't something that you can have. It's a constant struggle. And certainly in 1834, freedom was significantly about freedom from slavery, from chattel slavery, from being owned from birth to death and not being able to, have certain rights and as well as responsibilities as a consequence of not even owning yourself. I think today the freedoms are different. Sometimes it's freedom of expression, sometimes it's freedom of movement, which we are still working with. Sometimes it's related to freedom from harassment and strife. I think there are always issues that we can join together to address
Yeah.
that will ultimately make things better. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is that many of the things that have happened over the course of Canada's history that have made things better for Black people or for people with less power have ultimately improved the lives for everyone. Like, for example, our healthcare system, or, a 40-hour or 35-hour week, or rights for workers, too. I mean, these are the things that um, we have to fight for sometimes,
Yeah.
and government doesn't always just do.
Okay. I want to go back to the Black History Month. Who are some Black Canadians that you think people should be aware of? Oh, there's a book. That was good. Okay.
And so I mean, I pull up, yes, shamelessly self-promoting my best-selling book, The Kids Book of Black History in Canada, which you can get anywhere, and it's available on Amazon. And so,
Uh,
while of course I can think of many people, I mean, if you're thinking about the Underground Railroad, people like Harriet Tubman or Marianne Shadd, Frederick Douglass, Josiah Henson, they're in the book, and they're people that everyone should know
Tell
about.
us a little bit about one or two of those people.
Sure. Um, well, Harriet Tubman is a personal favorite of mine because I remember going to St. Catharines, Ontario, and meeting a woman many years ago. Her name was Helen Smith, and she first told me about Harriet Tubman, and she wondered aloud if she might even be a descendant of Harriet Tubman because Harriet Tubman had lived in St. Catharines for at least 8 years. Unfortunately, as an adult, when I did my research on Harriet Tubman, Helen Smith was not a descendant, but many other people are, and they may not even realize that they are. While Harriet had no children of her own, she had many great nieces, great grandnieces, and nephews. Who's Harriet Tubman? Harriet Tubman is the youngest in her family to be born in enslavement in Maryland. She was forced to work starting pretty much when she was about 5 years old, while the white children on that same plantation that she had socialized with went to school. By the time she was about I'm going to say 14-ish. She saw somebody running near the Bucktown General Store, and she either actively intervened or accidentally got in the way, resulting in her being hit with a 2 kilo counterweight, which caused her a brain injury and perhaps also caused her narcolepsy and her visions. We don't know. But she ended up marrying John Tubman. To make the story go a little bit faster, found out that he was free, and she realized that her own mother had been in similar circumstances, should have been given her freedom upon the death of her owner, but was not. And so Harriet and her family had lived in slavery, even though they had legally been entitled to be free, as per the will of Harriet's mother. So, this, of course, you can imagine finding out her husband is free, she is not. They weren't living together. She scrapes together some money, checks with a lawyer, finds out that you know, she should have been anyway. She decides she's going to run away so that she can live in freedom like her husband. He won't go. He won't join her. So, I mean,
Why
it's
wouldn't he join her?
because he had his status where he was, and if he ran away, it would be an uncertain future for him.
Okay.
But that's a whole other thing about male female relations, right? Um, So she made her own way with the threat of being sold. She made her own way into um, Philadelphia initially, where she lived with the abolitionist community, got to know what was happening with them, went back to rescue her family, and that began Harriet Tubman's many trips on the Underground Railroad. Some people feel she made as few as 7. Other people feel that she made as many as 19. 11 of those rescue missions began and ended in St. Catharines, Ontario.
That
So she brought her charges to Canada, and from there, and her family, at one and until ultimately there was the American Civil War. She goes back, and what happens? Not only is she this amazing woman who is um, a freedom leader, but she also goes back and ends up planning and executing a raid on the Combahee River during the American Civil War, making her the only Black woman to plan and execute a military maneuver in world history, I believe.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you for this. This is a really interesting, and I knew a little bit about the connection with St. Catharines, but I didn't know that that's where the journeys on the Underground Railroad began and ended. One of
Yeah.
the things we have in Toronto is an annual Freedom Ride on the TTC, which
Yes.
is a really wonderful commemorative event. Want to encourage people to come out and participate in that because it is a really uh, motivating event. Let me ask you one other question too. What are the challenges now? Like, where do we go now with Black History Month? And what are the challenges that, to get towards full emancipation, to full freedom for Black people and for others as well?
Well, there isn't going to be full freedom until there's a full opportunity for everyone to thrive. And everyone is not thriving. I think that it's, we move ahead, but even as we move ahead, and some people do manage to do well, I think the vast majority of people of African origin find themselves um, struggling. Um, just because of restrictions and limitations that have plagued them during their life or that they experience right now. Whenever there's a downturn in the economy, people who are more precariously employed or newer hires are often the ones who are the most challenged. And I think that the growing threat, perhaps, or um, excellence of artificial intelligence may also have an impact on some of the entry level jobs that many people might have been eligible before prior. But we still have challenges for Black students in schools. While there's no official streaming, there are still examples of people being directed into programs that do not end up getting them to university, and not that all jobs that allow you to be self-supporting are university related. That certainly can help. Um, some of the trades are still perhaps rather narrow in how people are let in, the whole thing about foreign credentials and what that might mean. I mean, there's many, many challenges. And so I think that, like for me, my where I moved forward, I felt that adding to education, making people aware of the contributions that Black people have had over time, the potential for them to continue to make those contributions has been the lane that I have been in. But there are other lanes that other people have been in. People like who Zanena Akonde, who
Yeah.
I believe you've also interviewed, and who, I don't think many people realize that in addition to being in politics, she had done a lot as a teacher educator in terms of trying to make adjustments to curriculum to meet the special needs of new Black Canadian students in
She
particular.
she is still active.
I know.
I think she's 86 now, but
Yeah.
she was
She's
uh
88. I think that there's not only one person in the city of Toronto who's 88.
yeah. Oh, is she 88? Oh my goodness. Okay, I'd lost track. But she was the first Black woman to be a principal in the TDSB, the first Black woman to be a cabinet minister in a Canadian government in the Ontario NDP government in the early 90s. she's still active. She's still part of the Black Students Committee at the TDSB, and she's still active in Peel Region as well. So at 88, she's still a firebrand. It's quite a legacy that she's leaving.
It is absolutely.
Yeah.
But of course, she's not the only one. There are many others, but
Oh,
I mention her in particular because I've seen her recently, and I know that you've also interviewed Jill Andrew, and Jill and I run into each other frequently.
yeah.
We both did. She ended up going into politics as a result of a course that she took. Unfortunately, at the time, I didn't. I was moving, so that wasn't going to work for me.
Nice. No, Jill Andrews is also the first Black queer woman to be elected in Canada. So there's so many trailblazers, and you are one of them here. And so thank you so much for taking the time to, share your story and share a little bit of the history of both Black History Month recognition in Canada and the Emancipation Day. It's been really, really informative, and I hope people enjoy this video. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for being someone who's reaching out to tell these stories.
Okay, my pleasure. Okay.